Okay, good morning. We're on another review lesson today, lesson number 90, which is review lessons, or number 79, let me recognize the problem so it can be solved, and 80, let me recognize my problems have been solved. I don't know. Feels today, I don't know why, like something has opened up and the wind came along and blew everything away, and things are just brand new this morning for some reason. Like something, the wind blew something away. It's gone. I have no idea what it was. I just recognize a new sense of freedom and openness in my experience when I woke up this morning, um, which always is a good sign, I assume. Um, as I was reading these lessons, in number 80, let me recognize my problems have been solved. I'm recognizing my problem has been solved. I don't even know what the problem is. All I know, when I woke up this morning, I didn't have any. Um, and my mind was open. And there was a giggle in my heart, so to speak. Um, and then I opened to this lesson, and the old man, the master teacher, used to try to teach it this way, and I'll give you his shortened form of this teaching, and then I'll read to you what he was trying to illustrate. What is the shortest distance? What's the shortest distance between 2 points? A single point. The shortest distance between 2 points is a single point. It's including both points and a greater point, a larger point, an ever-expanding point. And this lesson is aiming to teach that. I seem to have problems only because I am misusing time. And that's the idea of ever-increasing single point. I believe the problem comes first and time must elapse before it can be worked out. I do not see the problem and the answer is simultaneous in their occurrence. That is because I do not yet realize that God has placed the answer together with the problem so they cannot be separated by time. And yet the ego can use time and your attention to it as a linear passing, as what was I told? I was talked about. The tech crew once gave me an understanding of time. To the human mind, time is this linear, linear course of sequential events that we seem to utilize as a way of judging progress or something. And when it's really, time is just a sleight of hand. All time is going on all the time. And no time is really passing. It's just the illusion of time and the passing of time, which allows us to think that the idea of separation, which seems to have resulted in a prolonged period of time within which we struggle till we find the answers, and perhaps have to die before we do on occasion. That is the illusion. The reality of it is that the problem and the solution occurred simultaneously in that tiny tick of time in which the ego attempted to circumvent eternity, but was not capable of doing except in a dream that has no reality whatsoever. But obviously, if all time is going on all the time, then the problems that you're experiencing, and the nature of time being the place where the way in which you find the solution. If all time is going on all the time, then the solution was there prior to the problem, which is how we reverse the temporal order. And it's characteristic of a miracle, by the way, which is what this is all about. The problem is a grievance, the solution is a miracle. And I invite the solution to come to me through my forgiveness of the grievance and my welcome of the miracle which takes the place. And what is forgiveness but going back to a point in your own mind where you withheld love for a second and now see that the withholding of love was what was causing you to have the grievance. It wasn't anything outside of you. You're getting the result of your own thinking. So we go back in time, heal the love lacks that we find in our own decision making, and then time collapses in on itself, and we recognize that the reality of love was given to us before we had the ability to think there was a problem. And the solution to the problems that we think we have is always going back to the reality of who we are in love, as love, and that being an eternal state outside of which there is nothing, and within which no time is ever passing, because it is the state of what eternity is, and we are eternal when we are infinite. So our ability to express love is infinite, and the abundance of love is an eternal part of us. And if there's only one problem, and the problem is that you think you're separate, then there could be only one answer. Go back prior to the problem to where you were never separate, to recognize that the problem has no reality and was solved in your creation, because God wouldn't create an obstacle course for his son to have to run in order to be who he is. He's going to be who he is no matter what he seems to do. This presents a problem to me which I would have resolved. The miracle behind this grievance will resolve it for me. The answer to the problem is the miracle which it conceals. If we begin to look at what's going on in time that way, we can begin to see that each moment can be a miraculous instant of finding a solution to a problem that never existed, but seems to have taken the place of the eternal truth of who we are and hidden it from our sight. So with the action of forgiveness and the miracle that solves the problem, we actually go back in time to advance. So we're going back to the beginning of time to advance prior to the ability for there having have been a beginning. So the solution precludes the ability for there to have ever been a problem. And finally, in our last sequence, we're talking about God takes the final step. That will certainly be the recognition that we all have shining on our smiling faces as we look at each other with one final final experience of gratitude that time never did take the place of eternity, and while it seemed to have circumvented the eternal and the infinite for a moment, the recognition that no such thing ever happened will be the joy that we take with us in the departure sequence. So we will be returned to this condition of total joy as we allow the miracle to replace the grievances that we're using to maintain our temporal identity in the seeming sequentiality of events that we watch, judge, which is how we get the grievance. This is right, this is wrong, this should happen, this shouldn't happen. And when none of it's real in any regard, I need not wait for this to be resolved. It's already been resolved. I can live with the simplicity of the recognition that salvation is complete and allow miracles to light the way as we discover that at no point in time have we ever been separate. The answer to this problem is already given me if I will accept it. The answer to the problem of separation precludes the ability for separation to have ever occurred. So we're going backward to go forward. When Jesus referred to himself as the Alpha and Omega, that's what he was attempting to convey. That's what you're here to learn. The Holy Spirit will teach me this if I will let him. And I will understand it is impossible that I could have a problem which has not already been solved. The shortest distance between 2 points is a single point. It gets simple if you let it. And it really is just the acceptance. If you can understand this conceptually, and of course you can understand it conceptually because you've taught yourself, and this is what Jesus is teaching, you've already taught yourself the impossible and believed it. If you could teach yourself to believe the impossible is true, certainly you have the ability to learn that the possible is not only true, but all that's actually occurring. Time cannot separate this problem from its solution. Of course it can. Time is just sort of an invention of your mind, a byproduct of separation, in order to seem to have the ability to dream of a solution. We understand. That's why I like this line. I seem to have problems only because I am misusing time. I believe the problem comes first, and time must elapse before it can be worked out. And the reason that it seems that way is because it gives purpose to time and keeps our focus on the temporal rather than allowing our mind to be raised up into the eternal and the infinite, where we truly do abide as whole and perfect, and where there truly is only a single point of ever expanding light reality, vibrating in the harmony that recognizes the totality of us as being the extension of that light with the equal ability and necessity, creative necessity to extend that light as it was extended to us. So today we're going to recognize that all our problems have been solved. If you can understand this, and you can understand this at the intellectual, conceptual level, it makes sense. It challenges your previous worldview. But if you could make sense or attempt to make sense of your previous worldview, then this will make perfect sense as well. Now you have a choice of which worldview you would like to utilize, because the power of decision is yours. The power of decision is yours, and the use of free will is being exercised in this dream in incidences of decision making, choosing what we want. Do we want reality to be real, or we would like there to be something other than reality that is also real? What takes the place? And that's what we're being offered each minute. And Jesus is in his benevolence and grace presents this to us over and over again in variant form associations, various sequence of words, sometimes seeming to deal with things that don't necessarily connect yet in our mind, simply because we think there are still problems that need to be solved because there are differences in problems. There's an order of difficulty, in other words. And we learn in the miracle principles there's no order of difficulty to miracles. One isn't even, one's not larger or greater. They're all exactly the same. That doesn't mean that we haven't placed more value on certain grievances than we have on other grievances. You know, he talks about little irritations, mild to wild. It's just a valuing system that comes along with the idea of segmentation and separation, where in which we think there's a myriad of choices and a time in which to make those choices. None of that is true. That's all the illusion that's presented to us and that we have made sense of and made real to us by allowing it to make sense to us. When you begin to read these lessons, like today's lesson, well, one or the other is true. Either the problem is instantaneously solved, the answer is simultaneous, or it's going to take time. Now, if your goal is the solving of the problem, and this is what we really need to look directly at, if the goal is solving the problem, then this way is faster and will lead you to a solution that can't be lost. If your goal is not to solve the problem, but to maintain the establishment of your own spatial temporal reference, then by all means ignore what's being spoken of in this lesson, because it will not allow you to live within your own sequentiality and eventually get old and sick and die. And that's the preference. That's what the ego doesn't want you to look at. It doesn't want you to look at where these two diametrically opposed means of solving problems lead you. One leads you directly back, the miracle leads you directly back to your own perfect, whole, infinite, eternally loving nature. The other keeps you in time looking for solutions that only give rise to further problems, that allow you to be further along in your own temporal sequence, arriving closer and closer to the moment where you attempt to solve your problems by dying once again. And no one has to do that any longer. Since the resurrection, no one has had to do that. It's just that it's so different. The way what you're being offered here is entirely different than the way you've been thinking and the way the world has wanted you to think. And for a moment, you have to, acclimate yourself to it and choose. But hopefully, hopefully in reading these lessons and your own communication with your own guide, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, or whoever else guides you, you really see what's being offered, what's on the table. And when you see, when you finally decide, I really want my problem to be solved once and for all, then once and for all there will have been a solution waiting for that moment to arrive in you. And the solution will be there at the point in which you arrive at the decision that you want all your problems to have been solved. And so therefore, they no longer have any reality, because in that simultaneous moment, the miracle has lit your way home to see that God would never have you suffer, and that it was all self-inflicted simply because you were not using time in the right manner. So let's change the way we use time today. Let's no longer misuse time, and let's recognize my problem has already been solved, and the answer was given to me simultaneously to correct it right now.